All right, good day to all of you. It is Saturday, July 11th, 2026. Another week has gone by. I know we did not do a live stream last week because it was the 4th of July, and I was initially planning on doing a live stream, but I kind of just gave up and decided I would just spend the day kind of relaxing and resting and, of course, celebrating. But we're back this week with another weekly live stream as we typically do on these Saturdays. Hope you all are having a good day. I certainly am doing quite fine, I'd say. And we have a number of things to talk about this week. Obviously, probably one of the biggest topics right now is El Nino, which continues to strengthen and grow, and it is looking increasingly likely, as I talked about in yesterday's video, that we are going to see a record-breaking El Nino event this year. So we're going to talk all about it. We're also going to take a look at what to expect in the tropics, including the Atlantic. And even though the Atlantic is quiet now, and even though this year is going to be an El Nino year, and more than likely we're not going to expect a lot of activity out of the Atlantic this year, maybe there is a chance that we might see something in about 10 days or so associated with non-tropical energy, potentially closer to home, either off the southeast or, as the main model that shows the signal right now has it, in the Gulf. And then you can actually see that here, the thumbnail kind of giving you a little bit of a sneak peek. I'll show you the models and we'll go over everything that the models have for us today, but maybe the Atlantic might produce something soon. So lots to talk about on this Saturday. Hope you all are having a great day. And let's jump right into it, shall we? Starting off, again, the biggest topic right now is El Nino. And I talked about El Nino in yesterday's video, and it is looking increasingly likely that we are going to see a record-setting El Nino event this year. And I think this picture of the latest sea surface temperature anomalies pretty much sums it up as best as it possibly can. The most classic-looking El Nino signal that I think you will ever see, with sea surface temperature anomalies here all throughout the equatorial Pacific, incredibly warm, anywhere from 1 to most areas along the equatorial Pacific now, stretching all the way from the coast of South America, even stretching now westward closer to the central and western Pacific. We now have widespread 2 degrees Celsius anomalies present, and we are now starting to see a lot of these 3 degrees Celsius anomaly shadings here also begin to shade in the eastern Pacific. And as this El Nino continues to strengthen, as we continue to have a bunch of these very strong westerly wind bursts, we're probably only going to see these anomalies here, especially these 3 degrees Celsius anomalies, spread further and further west. And the current sea surface temperature anomaly map is just incredible. And in fact, we are pretty much already in record-breaking territory. And that's one of my tweets from earlier. Let me scroll down because I reposted this tweet from Alex Borham, and I talked about this tweet in yesterday's video, but kind of want to talk about it again today because of how incredible it is. And Alex Borham basically says that we are now at 2 degrees Celsius on the raw sea surface temperature anomalies earlier than any other year, including 1997. And he's referring to this chart, and he's basically just highlighting here the sea surface temperature anomalies in, this year in the black line compared to all of the other extreme high-end El Nino events of the past, several decades, at least going back to the 1980s. And, we had 1982, 1997, 2015, all of the last few years, or the last several decades, top El Nino years. And this year, we are already eclipsing all of those years incredibly, even above 1982, even above especially 1997, which is kind of regarded as the strongest El Nino right now, although I guess 2015 kind of takes over for a few months here towards the end of the year. And if you hear any of the background noise, please excuse it. I do live in New York City after all. But I mean, this graph kind of just sums it up. We are on a record pace right now with El Nino already, and I think this sea surface temperature anomaly graph kind of perfectly highlights that. And even with the relative Nino index as well, with the daily sea surface temperatures there, and I reminded myself to bring up the relative Nino sea surface temperatures because at least some people I talked to a few days ago, they kind of got a little mad at me when I said that we already hit 2 degrees Celsius with the El Nino, but I was looking at the raw sea surface temperatures, but whatever. But even with the relative Nino index, we are basically just behind or, matching with 1997. And again, that's one of the strongest El Nino events on record of the last 20 to 30 years. So we are on pace with the top El Nino years. So it's safe to say that we are going to get a super El Nino and probably a near record-breaking, if not a record-breaking El Nino. And I think all of these graphs pretty much just confirm it. And there's nothing that's really stopping it at this point. And again, going to the latest sea surface temperature anomaly values for the Nino 3.4, taking a look at the last 2 weeks here, or last few weeks, going all the way back to April. And we've just been up and up and up since. And we've had periods of which we've, gone up significantly very quickly, and then we would level off and only, warm for a little bit, or sometimes completely level off, and then we would have yet another stretch of warming, level off a little bit, and then another stretch of warming. And it looks like right now we are kind of in that yet another stretch of warming phase right now, at least over the last several days here. You could really see consistent spiking of the Nino 3.4, and now because of that, the latest daily sea surface temperature value is at positive 2 degrees Celsius. So at least with the raw sea surface temperature anomalies for the latest daily plots, we are pretty much have already eclipsed super El Nino intensity. And then of course the relative Nino index already above strong El Nino. Obviously not quite at super El Nino intensity just yet. We are, a little bit behind, as typically goes with the relative Nino index. We fall behind. We're behind usually by like 0.4, 0.5 degrees Celsius, but this is going to catch up in no time, and probably in just a matter of a few weeks on the relative Nino index, we will be record-breaking as well. And it is pretty much inevitable at this point, and all of the models are pointing to it. And the European forecast for July is definitely pointing to it. And when this came out a few days ago, everyone was talking about it, as you would expect. But I mean, it's quite significant because it really does highlight the fact that we are pretty much going to be in for a record-breaking event. And I mean, just incredible. With the relative Nino index here, the European is basically forecasting us to reach 3 degrees Celsius with the relative Nino index, and virtually almost all of the ensemble members here reach above 3 degrees Celsius, except for maybe just a few, and then you even have a few of the relative index members here trying to push 4. But the one that does actually push 4, quite easily and kind of an astonishing way, is the regular unfiltered Nino 3.4 forecast. And we reach 4 degrees Celsius. Quite a few ensembles here, probably just under half of the ensembles reach, if not barely strike, 4 degrees Celsius on the latest July Nino 3.4 forecast from the European. And when we are already at 2 degrees Celsius here in early July, we've not even made it halfway through July yet, and we are already at 2 degrees Celsius on the raw sea surface temperature charts. Certainly doesn't make, 3.5, even just slightly higher than 3.5, all that unreasonable. And again, just goes to show how much of a strong El Nino event that we are going to have this year. And to kind of top it all off, even though we have something else that I want to show you besides it, it's the European, not just the European showing it, it's pretty much all of the models now But the Climate Prediction Center is basically all on board with us getting a super El Nino. Um, and even so much to the point that by the time we get to the October, November, December time period, the latest July forecast has the super El Nino chances at 80%. So, the Climate Prediction Center is saying that we are very likely going to hit El Nino by the time we get to the end of the year, 80%. And I am very sure that as the months go by here, probably next month's update for August, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the probabilities at like 95% or something like that. But already, even for August, September, October, which is the peak of hurricane season, we're already going to be very close to El Nino, super El Nino threshold, more than likely. And then for at least September, stretching all the way into the winter next year, we're probably going to be at super El Nino intensity. And I mean, especially when we have an El Nino as strong as, reaching super strength and, especially reaching the record strength that we might, you can bet your horse that we are going to be at a very, very strong El Nino intensity for quite a while. And we're probably going to stay that way all the way until the end of the year. But I mean, the end of the year technically is when we typically see El Nino peak anyways. And by the time we get to that point as well, as I said before, it's not just the European. The NMME for July also came out too. And once again, they as well show a quite insane El Nino picture. I mean, you don't really see this ever from the NMME. I mean, what are these anomalies here? Like 3, 4? Are they really topping the chart out at 5 degrees Celsius here? A tongue, and not just a small tongue, but a actual pretty decent sized tongue of what seems to be, chart topping anomalies being forecasted by the NMME, stretching for pretty much the entirety of the equatorial Pacific all the way into the CPAC. So definitely quite a strong El Nino being forecasted this year, and all of the models are now latching onto it. So I mean, they all were latching onto it before, but it's quite incredible that now we are in July, and we're getting closer and closer and closer towards the fall when El Nino is going to peak. And the models are still uptrending, which is quite incredible, to say the least. So all of the hype forecasts for everyone saying that we were going to get a, record strong El Nino this year, I doubted them at first, but I'll say it here. They are looking like they are going to be pretty spot on right now. Now, obviously, we could still see things fall short. Over the next few weeks, maybe we will have a period of warming that kind of slacks off or something like that. But at this point, though, it's pretty hard to even avoid us, reaching super El Nino threshold in the bare minimum. Now it's going to be a difference between whether or not we are, going to see a record-shattering El Nino versus whether we are still going to have a super El Nino, but it's not record-shattering. But either way, I think it is almost guaranteed that we are going to see a super El Nino this year. I mean, I think there's no way in avoiding it now. So, now that that's going to be the case, what implications is it going to have on the tropics? Well, I think we are pretty much already starting to see that play out. Lots of activity here in the Pacific right now. We have quite a few invests already out there. We have an invest here in the Central Pacific, Invest 90C, and this is actually the first invest that is formed of the year in the Central Pacific, and probably not the last. In fact, we're probably going to get another one here very soon, and we're probably going to get quite a number of invests as well in the Eastern Pacific too. But we also had just recently a very, very strong typhoon in the Western Pacific, Typhoon Bavi, and it is now a much weaker typhoon. In fact, I believe not long ago it has actually made landfall in China. So this is now inland, so this is definitely going to weaken from here on out. But for a few days, probably at least a week, Bavi was a pretty intense and quite a long-lasting storm at a very high intensity here in the West Pac. It became a quite strong Category 5, the classic super typhoon. And again, it's weakening now, but I'm pretty sure that we are not far behind before we see yet another strong, powerful typhoon in the Western Pacific. And certainly one thing that happens in these very strong El Nino years is the Western Pacific pretty much becomes a machine for producing these very strong, very long-lived, classic super typhoons. And the Eastern Pacific is also very active as well. In fact, let me bring you here to the latest National Hurricane Center outlook for the Eastern Pacific. This is the latest 8 a.m. tropical weather bulletin. And yeah, you can see quite a bit of activity here. We now have 4 areas of interest, incredibly. Now, more than likely, not all of these areas are going to develop, but just showing you the models, and I'll show you the models here in a little bit. More than likely, in my opinion, over at least the next 1 to 2 weeks, we're probably going to get at least 3 or 4 named storms, probably 1 or maybe even 2 hurricanes, and definitely very soon, I think we're probably going to get our first major hurricane here in the Eastern Pacific, and kind of a long time coming, because the Eastern Pacific was not very active last month, surprisingly. I honestly thought it would be a little bit more active. I mean, we started off the month active in the Eastern Pacific, where we had a few kind of weak tropical storms, but then it pretty much shut down after that. I mean, we did have another tropical storm recently, Douglas, but again, it was a weak storm as well. But it's about time for the Eastern Pacific to have a strong storm here, and more than likely, at least one of these areas of interest are probably going to produce it. More than likely, it's looking like it'll be this one here, closer to Mexico, as typical. And it has an 80% chance of development right now over the next 7 days, and this is probably going to get Invest designated to it very soon. And then, of course, we have Invest 90C as well. And the chances have actually gone down a little bit with this. It's only at a 30% chance now. It was a moderate chance a few days ago, so maybe 90C won't develop, Not always do, whenever things become an Invest, do they actually develop and become tropical systems. Sometimes invests fail, but more than likely here we're going to get a lot of invests in the Pacific over the next several weeks, and I probably venture to guess that the majority of them are not going to fail, and we're probably going to get another invest here in the Central Pacific soon, since there's another area of interest there, 40% chance. So again, just quite a bit of prime opportunities here for development coming up in the Pacific. The Atlantic, meanwhile, is dead quiet, but maybe that might change in about a week or so. Maybe we'll have to watch the Gulf here, and I'll talk about that towards the end. First off, though, looking at the satellite shot here in the Pacific, and you could see quite a bit of convective activity, and this is just how you know that the atmosphere is favorable and primed for tropical development, and especially in a large-scale area, just by the fact that we have so much convective activity happening in the Pacific right now. It just definitely tells you that the air is unstable. There's a lot of rising motion in the atmosphere. Compare that to, and I didn't initially have an Atlantic shot ready because I was mainly going to focus on the Pacific, but I do want to compare it to how the Atlantic looks. And you can see, I mean, night and day difference. Lots of convective activity in the Eastern Pacific. You could definitely tell that the atmosphere is unstable, juicy, lots of rising motion. The MJO certainly, I mean, obviously the MJO is very favorable for the Pacific this year. And that's obviously being very much helped by El Nino. And then on the other hand here, just bone dry, barren, almost no convective activity throughout the entire tropical Atlantic here. Maybe some activity here in the southern Caribbean. And this is probably associated with a tropical wave, but just very dry, very barren, probably lots of Saharan air coming off the coast of Africa. You could see the difference between how the atmosphere right now is just behaving between the both basins. And let me switch back here to the Eastern Pacific. I mean, you could just see it. The Eastern Pacific is much more primed for development right now. And there's certainly this area here that's looking quite interesting. Probably is associated with this area of interest here near 130 West. See if that lines up. It does. So that's probably the area here, and maybe its chances of development will go up decently. So again, probably looking at quite a few named storms coming up, and even the Central Pacific too, quite primed with tropical activity right now. And this is especially a sign of the fact that we have a El Nino right now in the Pacific. Just taking a look at how active the ITCZ is across the Central Pacific, and definitely a sign that things are quite favorable right now. And of course, that is all being amplified by El Nino. And this is quite a strong wave or low pressure here, quite aggressive convection with it. It's probably, I believe, Invest 98W. So, if it already has a very strong precursor, I'd assume 98W is probably going to develop here at some point in the Western Pacific. And I mean, just in general, you could see all of these pockets of energy here just scattered out throughout the Pacific. Not all of them are going to develop, but you could just see that they have the atmosphere available for it, and things are going to get active here in the Pacific. And let me show you that here on the GFS. And I'll take you out over at least the next week, but just look at the GFS here. First off, obviously we have this system that tries to develop. This is, again, I think the 80% chance area by the National Hurricane Center. Seems like this starts to get going in about 2 or 3 days. So again, we're probably going to get an invest out of this soon. And you saw why I said earlier that that's probably the first good chance we have at major hurricane development here in the Pacific. Well, already by the time we get to the next 4 to 5 days here, clearly a system that rapidly intensifies, and the GFS has this being a quite strong storm. So looking like that'll probably be our first contender for a major hurricane in the Eastern Pacific this season. And then look at that, immediately afterward, almost like a train begins to develop here. We have another strong storm that gets going. Maybe the GFS is overdoing this a little bit, but maybe it isn't. But the general theme here, strong storm develops, something else develops right behind it, and even that, starts to appear within the next 7 days. I don't want to do that. And then that goes on out. And then before you know it, yet another strong storm right behind it. So a hurricane train pretty much setting up here in the Eastern Pacific over the next 2 weeks or so. And this is very likely just the beginning of all the activity here that we're going to have in the Eastern Pacific, and certainly being reflected in the ensembles as well. Taking the ensembles out over to the next 2 weeks, and just low pressure tracks all over the place. And you could definitely see that there also are quite a few strong ensembles here as well showing up in the Eastern Pacific. And you also have quite a few ensembles here showing up in the Central Pacific as well. So alongside getting activity here to really start, pumping out in the Eastern Pacific over the next week to 2 weeks, we're probably going to have activity alongside that in the Central Pacific. So hence why, again, I say that more than likely we're going to get 3 or 4 named storms at least within the next week or so in the Pacific. And then that's probably just going to kick off what will be a long stretch of continuous activity here in the Pacific, probably taking us out all the way till the end of hurricane season. It's kind of like, whenever we think or, predict, long nonstop seasons in the Atlantic, looks like that they're going to have that kind of activity here in the Pacific coming up. So it's going to be a very active year But I mean, I predicted it. I told you all before that the Pacific would likely be very active this hurricane season, just generally given all the factors that it had, and looks like we are actually going to start seeing those fruits come to life here. And I think this time will actually be for real. I know I've said, for a few weeks in June, I was looking for when the activity would start in June in the Pacific, and took a little bit of time, but now we are in July, and we are slowly getting towards the middle part of July, and it's only a matter of time here before the Pacific wakes up, and that's definitely going to happen here very soon. The Atlantic, though, to close out, I do want to close it off here with the European ensemble, or not the European ensembles. I mean, I will show you the ensemble version of this model, but the European AI, interestingly enough, first off, I mean, I'll just show you here what it does across the Atlantic over the next week. Nothing much happens here in the Atlantic over the next week, and pretty much every single model hints at that. I mean, for sure, the Eastern Atlantic is probably going to be shut down, and we're not going to have anything to watch in the MDR here throughout probably the duration of the entire month. But, as I've mentioned before, given the setup for this year, I think our best shot at development would probably have to be off the southeast coast, maybe in the Gulf, in general, closer to home, because more than likely we're not going to be dealing with as much with the crazy strong wind shear, which is already, taking shape across the Caribbean right now, ripping wind shear that'll instantly rip apart any storm that gets near it. So, the subtropics, especially off the southeast and in the southwestern Atlantic, and even in the Gulf, those areas are generally kind of removed from that influence, or in the very least, just given the pattern that we see in an El Nino, those areas are not as unfavorable. And, especially given that we are in the early season right now still, notice what happens here. Once we get towards the 8 to 9 to 10 day time frame, looks like another frontal situation here where you have a front that moves off the East Coast, and then there's clearly some energy that then breaks off, and then the European AI, as we get towards around 10 days out roughly, I guess, because we're just over 240 hours out, so this is definitely in the 7 to 10, maybe 11 day time period. But interestingly enough, that the European AI begins to show something develop here in the Gulf. And I mean, that's definitely a sign of something trying to get going here. Low pressure that consolidates, and vorticity that tries to strengthen, and then kind of dilly-dallies a bit before it then moves onshore over the central Gulf. And this is 10 days out, and this is the operational model. So take it with a grain of salt, but I'm bringing it up because the European AI, to its credit, did show the signs of Arthur trying to redevelop here, or what would become Arthur, from whatever energy we had in the Bay of Campeche. If you guys remember how it all panned out, energy in the Bay of Campeche moved inland, and then the model, showed it reemerging over the northwestern Gulf and actually developing. And I believe the European AI and the AI models in general were among the first models to show it. So the fact that the Euro AI now has a signal here in the Gulf, roughly around 10 to 11 days out, certainly raises some eyebrows, and we'll watch it. And it's not just the European AI operational. Looks like some of the ensembles are too on board. I mean, not a lot. And interestingly enough, there's also another signal here in the Bay of Campeche, although that's very weak, so disregard that. But there are a few ensembles that do try to do something here in the northern Gulf. And when do they happen? Well, again, roughly around 8 to 10 days out, something does try to get going here in the Gulf. So we will be watching, and we will see whether or not the model is right, and maybe, just maybe, our first signs of development in the Atlantic are coming up. So even though the Pacific is more than likely going to take over for the next few weeks, to be expected given the strong El Nino setup we have right now, maybe, just maybe, the Atlantic will be able to squeak something out as well, and regain its sense of activity, just for a little bit, though, even as the Pacific is probably going to dominate here. So we will see whether or not that actually happens, though. Obviously, very, very far out in time, 10 to 11 days. Well, it's far out in time, but not like 2 weeks out. And, there's a little bit more, questions that you can ask when you see something around 8 to 10 days out. So again, we will be monitoring and seeing just how things are. So, with that being said, since I've gone over the main part of the discussion, I'm going to open the floor to all of you out there watching. Hope you guys are having, once again, a great day. And if you guys have any questions on what I've gone over so far today, or maybe if you want me to go over something else that I haven't talked about just yet, the chat board is open. I'll be monitoring, or if you just want to say hello, pitch that comment there as well. I'll be watching. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them now. And we'll probably do this for a few minutes before we wrap it up here. But hope everyone is having a great day. Hope you guys are all enjoying yourselves. And I mean, hopefully you're especially enjoying yourselves now, since hopefully the weather is cooler, especially compared to how it was last week. I mean, was utter insanity just how warm it got a week ago, and how widespread any of all of the warm weather was. And luckily it's not as warm now, but more than likely it's going to stay warm. But I mean, it's summer after all. All right, so let's see. Is this because of El Nino, and when is the Bay Area going to see some of the moisture? Well, I'm not sure what you mean by what is because of El Nino. You'll have to backtrack and tell me what I was talking about before I'm able to answer your question. But is the Bay Area going to see some moisture? Well, let's take a look here. Let's go to, I guess we'll go to the continental U.S. view as a whole. And let's bring up total accumulated precipitation. At least over the next week here, doesn't really look like the Bay Area is going to see much in the way in terms of moisture, unfortunately. Maybe some moisture might stream into the southwestern U.S., probably associated with tropical activity here as the Pacific, really gets active. But no, it does not look like the Bay Area is going to get a lot of moisture right now. And I'm not sure if you guys in California are still in a drought. I know for sure that the Southeast has been dealing with the drought quite a bit for the better part of most of the year, especially at the beginning of the year. I remember hearing a lot about the drought situation across the Southeast. But given this El Nino pattern, hopefully we can make up for all of that once we get to this winter, because typically, especially in very strong El Ninos, the Southeast tends to see a lot of moisture. So hopefully any sort of drought conditions that we had, so far this year could be cleared out by the time we get to the winter. And hopefully you guys are able to see, especially if I have any viewers watching from the Southeast, hope you guys get some moisture soon, because you guys are definitely going to need it. Let's actually check in on the drought conditions right now. Drought monitor. Let's see. U.S. drought monitor. And yeah, still quite a few areas here across the Southeast dealing with a significant amount of drought. So I guess, not a lot of drought conditions that are, significant across California now, but still out west here, man, you guys are dealing with quite a significant drought. I mean, I know for many here, especially out west, you guys had a record warm winter and not a lot of snow. In fact, barely any snow at all. So hopefully you guys are able to make up for that as well this year. And so because of that, not a lot of moisture from this past winter. Now we have significant drought conditions in place. But again, when it comes to moisture for the Bay Area, not looking like we'll see much of it over the next 2 weeks. All right. Not seeing a lot of comments right now, so if that's going to be the case, then I guess we might wrap up pretty early here. So, I mean, I'll give a few more minutes for any of you guys if you have any questions or comments you want to shoot. But if nobody has anything else to say, then I guess we're going to wrap up here very soon. I'll give it another minute or so, though. But at least in terms of the tropics right now, again, not much happening in the Atlantic Basin, and probably not much will happen this hurricane season. There has been some warming, though. I will say that there's been some warming in the Atlantic for the last few weeks, especially in the eastern Atlantic and near the Canary Current. So maybe if some of that warmth seeps down into the tropics and in the MDR, and we see the MDR warm up significantly for the next few weeks as we get into the peak of hurricane season, something could still happen. And I do believe, everyone is saying that this year is going to be a historically quiet hurricane season in the Atlantic, and it's definitely looking like it'll be not an active season by any stretch. I mean, just the pattern and just the overall fact that we're going to have a record strong El Nino, I just don't think, anything favors the Atlantic being super active or active at all. But something will happen at some point. I do think the Atlantic is probably going to get a one-off storm, or at least that one storm, that'll define the season and probably be quite a strong storm. I've seen some talks of people saying we'll have to watch off the southeast at some point. And just in general, over the last 10 or so years, no matter what happened during the season, there was always at least that one strong defining storm of the year. And, going back to the sea surface temperature anomaly charts here, and, let me actually zoom in on the Atlantic so we can get a better shot here. Let me go to the west. And you could see off the southeast, and especially in the Gulf, so we will have a lot in the way in terms of warm waters here to work with in the Gulf. And I mean, just never ceases to amaze me sometimes just how warm the Gulf gets, especially during the summer. But I mean, this happens every single year. But I mean, I'd imagine it especially was the case given the death ridge that we had pretty much over the east for the last week or so. So no wonder why the Gulf was able to warm up a lot, but lots of very warm sea surface temperatures right now. So that'll definitely come in handy for if something is able to get going here. But off the southeast coast, very warm sea surface temperature anomalies, many areas, 1, maybe even 2 degrees Celsius. And interesting that you're kind of seeing this tongue here of very warm sea surface temperature anomalies developing in the subtropics. And again, also decent amount of warmth here developing off Africa, and especially here off the northwestern coast of Africa, and near the Canary Current, that one area that I always talk about, that is kind of important. It may seem like it isn't. Some people may question why I even bring any sort of importance to the Canary Current, but for some reason, whenever we have warmth in this general region here in the Atlantic, First of all, it just, for some reason, it just triggers something in the Atlantic that we see something insane, or both, or that the warmth here just generally kind of seeps down southward and eventually warms up the MDR here. So I mean, I'd imagine with this year's scenario, we're more than likely not going to see something insane, at least when it comes to the overall hurricane season. But with warmth at least, I'd imagine that more than likely we'll have to watch and see whether or not the warmth here, seeps down southward into the MDR, and we'll have to watch off the southeast here, and generally closer to home. We'll have to watch and see whether or not this manifests, if there's that one lucky storm in the sea of wind shear that is going to be present in the Atlantic. If there's going to be one lucky storm that takes advantage of these very warm sea surface temperature anomalies off the southeast, and it'll be very significant because generally closer to home is where we're going to have to watch this year, and it's in the name, closer to home. It's going to be closer to us. So even though this year is going to be an El Nino, we still might not be out of the woods completely. But we will watch and see whether or not something actually happens, though. It's just a matter of luck at the end of the day. All right. Don't see any other comments here coming up, so if no one has anything else to say or ask me, I guess I'm going to leave it off here. So, with that being said, I hope all of you enjoy the rest of your day. Obviously, we will be watching the tropics, and we will see whether or not something does actually develop here in the Atlantic over the next week. But one thing that remains for sure is El Nino is looking intense. It's getting stronger. And I think there is no denying at this point that we are likely going to see a near record strong El Nino event this year. It's looking very unavoidable, and at this point, it's just a matter of when it is actually going to happen. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week's live stream. Hope you guys enjoyed what you saw. If you did, as I always say, and you want more of these live streams, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and also give this live stream a like as well to help the algorithm out for my channel too. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I will talk to you guys again very soon.